Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Menachot daf Pei Vav. We are going to begin on Pei Vav Amud Aleph by the first Mishnah, which is about 15 lines from the top. The Mishnah tells us there were shloisha zeisim heim, uvahen shloisha shmonim. So basically, there was 3 different harvestings of olives because they used to ripen at different times. And therefore, there was these 3 different levels, and each of the 3, there was 3 different levels within themselves. So it was actually 9 grades. So Rashi says there was shloishal lekitos, 3 harvestings. Yesh b'zay shaloit enois b'shlosh pa'amim. Each one is 3 oils, so there's actually 9 levels, as we'll see. So Hazayas Arishon, so the very first harvesting, so Migargro Baroish Hazayas, we would take them from the top of the tree, because those would ripen the fastest, because they were most connected to sunlight. So we would take them, but Kaitesh, we would pound them, but and put them into the basket. Actually, you should just put it around the basket, let them drip into it. And the reason why he says this, Rashi says, it'll drip. And also, we don't want it in the basket because because if you put it, there'll be some sediments, the parts which are not of high quality, that will be put into the basket. So therefore, it says better that you should put it around it so that let it drip down, and that would be a better solution. So that's the machlokes. So then what they do is they would weigh the olives down with a beam, and that pressure would cause more oil to come out. Actually, he said that instead we didn't use a beam, rather, again, that would cause the sediments to come out more. So instead, he said you should use a stone, and that would be able to produce better oil that way. He said basically it's done a third time, and that's the third level. So those are the 3 different oils in the first harvest. So harishon l'menayir v'shar menachos. So the first oil that came out, you can use for the menorah, and all the other ones can be used for the mincha offering. Now, of course, that can obviously clearly infer that when it comes to the menorah, we don't use oil which comes from stages 2 or 3. Okay, that's the first harvest. So the v'shar menachos. Hasheni megargru b'roish hagag. So the second one, it was by the rooftops, in which the sun came to that area. So they weren't as ripened as the first batch. They were not as good. The kaitish v'noisel. So again, we would do the same thing with them. We would press them and put it into the basket. Rishon. Again, Rabbi Huda says the same thing. Don't put it in the basket, but around it. Toyin b'kaide, we use a beam. Rabbi Huda oimer b'avadim, we use stones instead. Zesheni. Because of a tacham v'toyin zeshlishi. Again, harishon l'menayir v'shar menachos. It's the same din that even though this is the second harvest, you could still use the first extraction of the oil for the menorah, but not anything else. The other stages cannot be used for menorah. Shlishi, the third harvest, so a tenu b'bayis. So at this point, Rashi says, loiket zeisim hatachtainos, the ones which are on the bottom, the sun's not shining as much on them, in mispashos yafa. And therefore, because of that, you can understand that they're not going to be as ripened as the first 2 batches, as the first 2 harvests. So what is otanu bebeis habad? Ad sheyilkeh, so you put it into the olive press, umalehu umenagvay b'roish hagag, you bring it up and let it dry on the top of your roof, and then at that point it'll at least have done something to get some of the oil the juice is flowing. So kaitish v'noisel chasal, again you press it put it in the basket. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer savivos asal zerishon. He doesn't want you to put it mamish into the basket because it'll cause some of the sediments to go into there. Tayin b'kayre Rabbi Yehuda Eimer ba'avadim zesheni. The second step is either use a beam or Rabbi Yehuda a stone. Again, so these 9 different levels, when it comes to the harvesting, each of the first extractions of oil, even if it's the third harvest, you could still use that for the menorah. So the Gemara asks, boil who? When it says the word megargro tanan or megalgalo tanan, Rashi says, megargro is sheminiach hazayis, that you put the oil, the olives, ajnis bashlu hagargonim kol tzarchim, until they're completely ripened. Omegalgal tanan. Dahainu nami sheminichin beilon, that you keep it on the tree, ajnis bashlu yafik, until it's again. So it almost doesn't sound like a real nafkamina, except in the language. So Tashma decided Hashem and Zayas mizaysoi mikan omru. From here we derive that Zayas rishon megalgaloi. And it says the language Megagala, they will let it ripe on the tree. The council of Beis Abad, then it's brought into olive press. Shemen. Which comes out from that that process, Zahayarishon, it's the first step. Then Toyin B'Kaira, Shemen, and Hayotzim Mimenu Zahayasheni. When you use the beam to press the oil out, that's the second step. Because they're Upaidak, a little different language, Tachan v'Tayan, and you you press and grind. So that Hayashlishi, Harishal Menorah B'Shor Menachos. V'chein Zayas Sheni, V'Zayas Shlishi. Same thing when it comes to the second, third harvest. Oteneba Beis Habad, Ad Shiyulke. It's in the olive press until it basically gets softened and fit for oil to come out. Umal Rosh Hagag, you put it on the top of the roof. V'yoisa oisa kimin tamra, and you do this kimin tamra. Rashi says kisha oisin oisu gargaris, the same way that you would make like dried figs or tamara or dates. Ad she is zobu meimav, until the flows the liquid out of the fruit. You bring into the olive press the teichna b'richayim, you grind it with milk in the millstone. Put in the basket. B'shem hayotzim mimenu zeh hayarishin. Toin b'kar, use the beam. Shemen hayotzim mimenu zeh hayasheni. Parachaz of a teichan. V'toyin zeh hayashlishi. Harishon menorah b'shor menachos. So this, of course, is the sheet of the Tanakama, and then like in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer loha teichna b'richayim, is that no, that we would not use the millstone because that takes out sediments and it becomes not as good. El kaidsha b'machteshes, you use a mortar. You don't use a beam el bavanim, as the Mishnah said. You don't put it into the basket itself. So basically, it's a lot of repetition from our Mishnah, but it teaches us the words megagla. So haguvakasha. Apparently, we have a stira. Kaitesh, money. Who is this notion who says that kaitesh, that you should like pound it? So Rabbi Hudahi, teichasal, when it says in the basket, ataynu rabbanan, that's certainly not Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda says don't put it in the basket. So haitana several kavasim bechada upaglo bechada. It could be that he agrees with the Tanakama regarding one thing, regarding putting in the basket, but he disagrees with the Tanakama, but rather Rabbi Huda, that you're kaitish. Let's see the next Mishnah. Harishon shibarishon ein lo malamenu. The first harvest and the very first stage, that's the best. So whenever we use anything in the base of Mikdash, we always want it to be of the highest quality. And therefore, even by Menachos, if you're able to use good quality oil, kol kavod, and do it. But these are the different steps. Harishon shibarishon ein lo malamenu. There's nothing better than the first harvest and the first step. Hasheni shibarishon, barishon shibasheni shavan. The second harvest was the first step in the second harvest, or the first step in the second harvest, they're equal, because they're basically one off from the top in either direction. Hashlishi shibarishon, which is 2 away, right? The third step of the first. Hasheni shibasheni, right? So shlishi shibarishon is 2 away from perfection. Sheni shibasheni is also 2 away because it's the second step in the second harvest. Barishon shibashlishi shaman, because that's also 2 away because it's the third harvest. It's 2 harvests away, but it's the top. So therefore, they're all equal. They're all like 2 off, if you will. Hashlishi shibasheni v'hasheni shibashlishi shaman. You can understand whether it's the third step in the second harvest or the second step in the third harvest. That's the same thing. Hashlishi shibashlishi in lamati menu. The third step in the third harvest is the lowest level, lowest quality. Av kol menachos hayu bedin sheitunu shemen zayazach. The truth is, we should learn out from Kavachimer that not just in menorah, but also we should require that the mincha offering should require high quality pure oil. Why? Ma menorah she'enu lachil otain shemen zayazach menachos she'enu lachil enu din she'itanu shemen zayazach. So when it comes to the menorah, that's something in which is not physically eaten by a person. It's just burned. It's fuel. So nonetheless, for some reason, we require it to be, the pasuk says it has to be pure olive oil. So you should say the same thing by the menachos. That certainly should require shemen zayasach, because after all, it's something that you eat. So you would want it to be the highest quality of oil. The pasuk as a diak says it's dafka by the menorah. Question 1. So zayas, so at least zach is only for the menorah, but not for menachos. Okay, we're gonna finish up that question as we continue now to Amud Beis. So as we continue to pay Vav Amud Beis, Shavin. So we're saying that they're equal. What do you mean? How can we say that this is equal to this is equal to this? But Amr Rishon Menayir v'Shor Menachos, right? When it comes to only the step, when it comes to harvest 1, 2, and 3, step 1 of each of those harvests, only that can be used for the menorah. So how can you tell me that, for example, step 1 in the third harvest is equivalent to step 3 in the first harvest? You can't use that for a menorah if it's not step 1. So the Gemara says you're right. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak, my shavin menachos. So when we use the mincha, even though again the flour offering we can use all different types of oils, but if we have different choices, we want to use the better one. But you're right. When it comes to menorah, it has to be from the first step of one of the 3 harvests. Av kol menachos haya bedin mechul. So tanrabanan zoch, that has to be pure. Ein lil zoch, ein zoch el naki, means it's clean, pure. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kosis, when it says that it must be kosis, pounded. Ein ksos el kotosh. Again, it means it's pounded. Okay, that's his reading of this pasuk. So yochli he zach kosis posum menachos. You would think that you can't use zoch and you can't use kosis. Talmud Loimer of Yisrael so is bul b'shemen siv kosis. So it sounds like it's only supposed to be used for ma'or, but not for menachos. No, it doesn't mean you can't use it for menachos. It just means it's not required. Now, the reason why we say that it's not required by the mincha is mipnei ha-chischain, because of financial loss. My chischain. So Rabbi Lezer, hatar chasal mamonim shel Yisrael, that the Torah has compassion on the Yidden. So what does that mean? So Rashi says over here that, of course, you could use it. However, he says, Lafisha hamanachos hein marubais. To use the flour offering, there was a lot of them. Sricha shemen harbe, you need a lot of oil. V'ilu hayut sarech lachzer b'menachos. If when it came to the mincha offering, nami acher zach v'kosis, that you would mamish have to use only the highest quality of pure oil and pounded, which is much more processed, just like the menorah. So this is an unbelievable line. So they would end up being it would be very expensive, based on supply and demand. There would be a strong demand for this product, and therefore they'll raise the price. And interestingly enough, Rashi quotes down here as well that we find this by Nigi Batim. When it comes to Saras, so it says in the Torah's Kohanim, it's brought down, Ufanu asabayas, that you should clean out your house before the Kohen comes in. He says, because there may be certain things in your house which, if they in fact are, the house is rendered as impure, that's tameh, then all of a sudden, like a kli cheres, it can't be purified. It has to be broken, destroyed. So therefore, we say we want you to take out the stuff first, just in case your house becomes tameh and everything inside it too. Now, certain things you can purify, right? You can put them in mikvah, certain kalim, but certain things you can't. So again, we see that the Torah has rachmanus. And this is not just a pashut yid. This is someone who is sinful, right? The fact that he has saras on his house means he's no tzaddik. Nonetheless, it doesn't make any difference. We still have mercy on that person. It's a pretty unbelievable idea. Okay. All right. Fine. So that is entirely question one, that it's not just zach, but also kosus. You don't have to use more expensive oil. All right. So with that said, the Gemara continues with an interesting Agadic interpretation. Saves b'nei Yisrael v'yichol lecha shemen zayis zach. You should take oil. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani alecha v'lo li lo oira nitzarich. I want you to take it for yourself. It's not for me, right? Which is an interesting idea. The purpose of the Beis HaMikdash is not for God; it's for us. So the light, God doesn't need the light; it's for us. Shulchan b'tzaf u'menorah b'daram. We know that the table in the Kodesh, which had the showbreads, was in the north, and the menorah, which gave out light, was in the south. So Amar Zreika, Amar Belezer, lo lachil nitzarich, lo oyer nitzarich. I don't need the food on the shulchan, and I don't need the light in the menorah. V'yasol bayis chaloini shikufim atumim, that he made the windows wide and narrow. So tana shikufo mibifnim, they were wide from the inside, v'atumim mibachutz, but they were narrow on the outside, which is illogical, because you want to have wider windows in the outside so the light can come in. But if the windows are narrower in the outside, in the outer area, so then you're not going to get any light, right? So so which means that when it came to the light didn't come from the outside in; it came from inside out. Testimony the Shekhinah is there. Maybe God does need the light. All 40 days they only went with my light. Is the testimony my deuces. What's the testimony? What can people see over there? So Merav Zen near Maravi. Shenoisin ba shemen keneged chavruteha mimeno hayimadlik uva Messiah. So basically, they would put, it says kamidas on the side, the same amount of oil out of all the lamps of the menorah. They would put in the Ner Maravi, and this question is it the middle one, or is it the one which is closest to, or the second closest to the west one? Because as Rashi says over here, that the way it was designed in Masechtas Talmud, there were these two lamps on the east. There's the one which is not all the way west. The one west, continuing in the Kodesh, you go west, you're going to hit the Kodesh Kodashim. So the menorah was in this direction, east-west, on the southern side of the Kodesh room. So therefore, the lighting came from the light of the west, close to the Kodesh. That's the Kodesh Kodashim. It says, "Oynis mizrach amarev mechava achas shematzad mizrach." So the one, some of them would extinguish. U'menasham maniach achas shematzad oiso shemamizrach hu ner maravi. So not the one all the way to the west, one which is a little bit to the east of it. The second one, that was ner hamaravi. U'menicha doilecha sadal erev v'madlichas achronos shekavu b'shachar. Okay. So some people say it was the middle one. There's a machlokas exactly what was the Ner Meravi, but we see that this was the miracle. Okay, Adkan.